She was working the night shift. That detail matters because it explains why she was the only one there. The Harlan Motor Inn sat at the junction of Route 9 and Old Kettle Road, 11 miles outside Delworth, Tennessee. It was the kind of motel that existed because something had to. 42 rooms. A vending machine that took your dollar and gave nothing back. A lobby that smelled like carpet cleaner and old coffee. Sandra Pruitt had worked the front desk there for 6 years. She knew every sound the building made. She knew which guests were passing through and which ones were running from something. On the evening of March 11, 2018, Sandra was sitting behind the desk with a crossword puzzle folded into quarters. 17 across. A 7-letter word for inevitable. She hadn't filled it in yet. At 7:42 p.m., the lobby door opened. 2 young women walked in together. The younger one was smiling at something the other had just said. The older one stopped smiling when she reached the desk. She paid in cash 2 nights, room 14, end of the East Wing. Sandra noticed she counted the bills without looking down at them. She also noticed the woman's eyes moved to the parking lot door twice while Sandra was processing the keycard. Sandra thought, tired, maybe scared of something small. She'd seen that look before and it had always turned out to be nothing. She gave them the key. She watched them walk down the east corridor. She went back to her crossword. She never saw them walk out. That is the beginning of the Merritt case. Not the search teams. Not the press conference. Not the man eventually charged. The beginning is a woman at a desk with a crossword puzzle, watching 2 sisters disappear into a hallway, and deciding reasonably, understandably, fatally, that it was probably nothing. Delworth County, Tennessee, March 2018. The question that has never been fully answered. What did Sandra Pruitt see in that parking lot that she hasn't been able to stop seeing since? Deanna Merritt was 24 years old. She had a system for everything. Her pantry was alphabetized. Not as a quirk, her roommate said, but because she genuinely found it calming to know where things were. She kept a running notes document on her phone titled, Things to Follow Up On. She texted her mother, Roberta, every night before bed. Not long texts, sometimes just, still here. Roberta said she never thought much about those texts until they stopped. Calla Merritt was 19, 5 years younger than Deanna, and in most ways her opposite. Where Deanna planned, Calla arrived. She had a laugh that her high school drama teacher described as structurally unsound. Too big for the room, always. She ordered 2 desserts at restaurants not because she was going to eat both, but because she liked having options. She was studying early childhood education at Delworth Community College. She told her advisor 2 weeks before she disappeared that she wanted to work with kids who didn't have anyone fighting for them. She was the kind of person who said things like that out loud and meant them. The sisters had grown up in Hartwell, 40 minutes east. Their parents had divorced when Calla was 7, but both girls described their childhood as ordinary in the ways that mattered. Roberta worked dispatch for the county utilities department. Their father, Gene, remarried and moved to Georgia. They stayed close to their mother. They stayed close to each other. Deanna had moved to Delworth 2 years prior for work, administrative coordinator at a regional logistics firm. Calla had followed the year after, partly for the college, partly, everyone agreed, because she went where Deanna went. They shared an apartment on Linden Street. Deanna kept the kitchen alphabetized. Calla kept the living room in what she called organized chaos. Neighbors described them as quiet, considerate, the kind of tenants you don't notice because nothing ever goes wrong. 3 weeks before she disappeared, Deanna Merritt wrote the name Harlan Motor Inn on a yellow post-it note. The note was found on her desk, stuck to the corner of her monitor. No one knew why she had written it. No one thought to ask until it was too late to ask her. Tuesday, March 11, 2018, began for the Merritt sisters the way most Tuesdays did. Deanna left work at 5:15 p.m. Her keycard log placed her exit at exactly that time. A colleague who passed her in the parking lot said she seemed fine. Maybe a little distracted, but fine. Deanna drove to the Highland gas station on Commerce Street, filled the tank, and bought a bottle of water and a packet of trail mix. The receipt was time-stamped 5:34 p.m. At 5:58, she called Calla. The call lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Neither of them left a voicemail. At 6:22 p.m., Calla sent a text to a friend named Bree that said, "Can't make dinner, going with D, tell you later." Bree replied with a question mark. Calla never responded. At 6:45, Deanna's car was captured on a traffic camera on Route 9, heading west, toward Kettle Road, toward the Harlan Motor Inn. At some point between 6:45 and 7:42, the sisters stopped at a drugstore. The receipt found later in Deanna's jacket pocket showed 2 items: a travel-size bottle of ibuprofen and a prepaid phone card. The drugstore was 6 minutes from the motel. No one has ever established why they needed a prepaid phone card. Sandra Pruitt's Tuesday had been unremarkable in every way that ordinary Tuesdays are unremarkable. She arrived for the 3 p.m. shift to find a note from the day manager about the ice machine in the South Corridor being out again. A guest in room 7 had checked out without returning his key card. Someone had left a fast food bag in the stairwell. She dealt with each of these things in the order she found them. By 7 p.m., the lot had 4 cars in it. All of them guests she'd already processed. The Route 9 traffic had thinned. She made herself a coffee, settled behind the desk, and unfolded the crossword. At 7:42 p.m., the lobby door opened. 2 women walked in. Sandra processed them in under 5 minutes. Room 14. 2 nights. Cash. She noted the key card handover in the log as she always did. She watched them walk to the East Corridor, noticed the older one pause once, just for a second, and look back toward the lobby entrance before she turned the corner. Then they were gone. 45 minutes later, a vehicle Sandra had not seen pull in was idling in the far corner of the lot. A blue pickup truck, older model. There was a dent in the rear passenger panel. The driver did not get out. He sat with the engine running and his headlights off for approximately 20 minutes, facing the east wing. Sandra watched him through the lobby window. She waited for him to move toward the office. He didn't. She thought about calling someone and decided she was being paranoid. At 9:03 p.m., the truck left. She went back to her crossword. Roberta Merritt called Deanna's cell phone for the first time at 10:15 p.m. on Tuesday. It went to voicemail. She called again at 11:30. Voicemail. She told herself Deanna had probably fallen asleep early. She tried Calla's phone. Same result. By Wednesday morning, she was calling every 20 minutes. By Wednesday afternoon, she was calling the police. The missing persons report was filed at 3:47 p.m. on March 13th, 36 hours after the sisters were last verifiably seen. The duty officer who took the report noted that both women were adults, that there was no immediate evidence of foul play, and that a 36-hour absence, while concerning, did not yet meet the threshold for an active search deployment. Roberta told him about the texts. She told him Deanna had never once gone a night without sending one. The search for Deanna and Calla Merritt formally began March 14th. Volunteers were organized. A grid was established. The primary search area was focused on Hatcher's Reservoir, for miles north of Delworth, based on a tip from a hiker who believed he'd seen 2 women matching the description near the East Trailhead on Wednesday morning. That tip was unverified. The search grid was built around it anyway. That same afternoon, March 14th, approximately 4:20 p.m., Sandra Pruitt was watching the local news on the small television mounted above the lobby fireplace when the Merritt sisters' names appeared on screen. She recognized them. She picked up the phone and dialed the non-emergency line. She told the dispatcher her name. She told him she was calling from the Harlan Motor Inn on Route 9. She told him that 2 women matching the description on the news had checked into room 14 on the evening of March 11th. She gave the room number. She gave the check-in time. She described what the older sister had been wearing: a gray fleece, dark jeans, white sneakers. She described the cash payment. She described the way the woman had looked at the parking lot door. Then she told him about the truck. Blue pickup, older model, dent in the rear passenger panel. Driver who sat in the far corner of the lot for approximately 20 minutes with his lights off, watching the east wing, and then drove away. The call lasted 7 minutes and 40 seconds. The dispatcher's log entry read, "Tip received Merritt case. Caller, Sandra Pruitt, Harlan Motor Inn, RT9. States victims may have checked in March 11th. Unverified. No follow-up required at this time. No follow-up required. The words that would define the next 4 years. By the end of the first week, the search at Hatcher's Reservoir had turned up nothing. No clothing. No personal items. No physical evidence of any kind that the Merritt sisters had ever been near that trailhead. The hiker who provided the original tip was interviewed a second time and acknowledged he couldn't be certain about the date. He thought it might have been a week earlier. He wasn't sure about the hair color either on reflection. The search grid was adjusted. The reservoir area was scaled back. Investigators began canvassing businesses along the Route 9 corridor, the same corridor where the Harlan Motor Inn sat, but the canvass focused on the 48-hour window beginning March 13th, the day the sisters were reported missing. Not March 11th, the day Sandra had told the dispatcher they'd checked in. Sandra Pruitt called the department again on March 19th. She had a new detail. In the days since her first call, she had been thinking about the truck. She'd been thinking about the dent. She'd also been thinking about something else she hadn't mentioned on the first call because she hadn't been certain enough at the time. She was certain now. The truck she'd seen was a pre-2004 model. She knew enough about vehicles to say that with confidence. Her ex-husband had driven the same generation for 10 years. She knew the body shape. She told the investigator who took her second call, pre-2004 blue pickup, rear passenger panel dented, possibly a Ford or Chevy. She couldn't say for certain which. She gave this information clearly, calmly, specifically. The department expanded its vehicle registry search in response. They expanded it to exclude trucks manufactured before 2004. To look for newer models. In the wrong direction. For 3 months. Sandra Pruitt's account, reconstructed from her 2 call logs, her later statement to a journalist, and her testimony to a cold case review panel, runs as follows. March 11, 2018. 7:42 p.m. 2 women enter the Harlan Motor Inn lobby. The older one, later identified as Deanna Merritt, leads. The younger one, Calla, is a half-step behind. Both carry overnight bags, one black, one olive green. Deanna requests a room. She specifies, ground floor, end of a corridor if possible. Sandra notes this as a preference she's heard before. Traveling women often request it, she says, because it feels more private. Deanna pays $78 in cash. She counts the bills without looking at them. She takes the key card with her right hand. With her left, she is gripping the strap of her bag. Sandra asks if they need anything, extra towels, directions. Deanna says, no, thank you, we're fine. Calla says nothing. She is looking at the corridor, not at Sandra. At no point do either of the sisters look frightened in the way that would be obvious. What Sandra describes is something quieter. Watchfulness, she says. They were being very careful about what they were paying attention to. They walk to room 14. Deanna pauses at the corner, looks back at the lobby entrance, turns. They disappear down the corridor. At 8:27 p.m., Sandra hears a door close somewhere in the east wing. She does not hear it open again. At approximately 8:40 p.m., the blue pickup enters the lot. It does not pull into a marked space. It pulls to the far end, angled toward the east wing. Lights go off immediately. Engine stays running. Sandra can see the exhaust in the cold air. She watches the vehicle for several minutes. The driver does not move, does not get out, does not appear to be on a phone. He is simply sitting there. On his lap, and this is the detail Sandra did not mention until her second call, the detail she wasn't sure enough about. Something that she describes as a dark-colored utility belt or tool roll. Military-style webbing. She can see it because the lot light catches the buckle when he shifts in his seat. At 9:03 p.m., the truck leaves. Sandra watches it turn right onto Route 9, heading south, toward Kettle Road. 11 months after the investigation stalled, a journalist named Faye Okafor filed a Freedom of Information request for all communication logs related to the Merritt case. What she received, after a 6-week delay and 2 appeals, included Sandra Pruitt's 2 call logs. The first log recorded the core information Sandra had provided: the motel name, the room number, the check-in details, the truck. It also recorded the dispatcher's notation. Caller appeared emotional. Sandra Pruitt had not been emotional. Everyone who knows her says the same thing. Her ex-husband, her sister, the cold case investigator who would eventually interview her. She is a precise person. She speaks in specifics. She does not dramatize. The notation had no supporting evidence. No recording. No second dispatcher to corroborate it. It existed in the log as a single line, and that single line had been enough to ensure that neither of Sandra's calls triggered a follow-up response. Faye Okafor published her findings in March 2020, 2 years after the sisters disappeared. The article named the truck detail. It named the pre-2004 exclusion error. It named the Harlan Motor Inn. Within weeks, the Delworth County Sheriff's Office opened a cold case review. The review established within its first month of work that a man named Roy Eldon Casper, a 51-year-old former Army logistics contractor living 9 miles south on Kettle Creek Road, owned a 2001 Ford F-150. Blue. Rear passenger panel dented. The registration had been in the database the entire time. He had been excluded from the vehicle canvas because the search had been directed at trucks manufactured after 2004. Sandra's description had been precise. It had been logged. It had been ignored. When the cold case investigator called Sandra to tell her the vehicle registration matched, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I know. I've known for 4 years. Not triumphant. Not relieved. Just steady in the way that people are steady when they have been carrying something heavy for a very long time and are too tired to put it down even now that someone has finally offered to help." The second confirmation came from the physical evidence file. Among the items recovered near the tree line on Casper's property during the 2020 search was a piece of nylon webbing. Dark green, military-style buckle. It had been photographed and catalogued in 2018 during a routine property survey conducted for an unrelated matter. At the time, it had not been connected to the Merritt case. Sandra had described it 2 years earlier. The item sat in an evidence photograph. The call log sat in a filing system. Neither had ever been placed in the same room as the other. That is the third braid point. The moment when 2 pieces of information, both existing in the official record, were finally put next to each other by people who were looking at the case for the first time rather than the people who had been assigned to it from the beginning. The fourth braid point is smaller and worse. In the cold case review notes, there is a line, unremarkable in its phrasing, devastating in what it confirms, that reads, "First contact witness account consistent with recovered physical evidence and suspect vehicle registration. Tip classification of March 14, 2018, unverified, no follow-up required, not consistent with information provided." Not consistent with information provided. The bureaucratic phrasing for, "She was right and they didn't listen." Deanna Merritt and Calla Merritt were found on the property at 4412 Kettle Creek Road in September 2020. The location was 11 minutes by road from the Harlan Motor Inn. It had not been included in any search grid at any point in the original investigation. The original search had focused on the reservoir area, for miles in the opposite direction, built around a tip that the lead investigator later acknowledged had been given more weight than the evidence warranted. The sisters had been there since March 2018. Roy Eldon Casper was arrested in October 2020. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. By the time the case reached trial, the physical evidence at the scene had been significantly degraded. 2.5 years of exposure, weather, and decomposition. The forensic case was described by the prosecution team as circumstantially strong but materially compromised. Casper was convicted on 2 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 41 years. The family attended every day of the trial. Roberta Merritt sat in the front row. She wore Deanna's gray fleece on the day the verdict was read. She said afterward that she was grateful. She said it clearly, without qualification, because she knew what grateful meant and she also knew what it cost. If Sandra Pruitt's second call had been actioned on March 19, 2018, investigators would have reached 4412 Kettle Creek Road 11 days before Casper removed and destroyed materials from the property. The prosecution's forensic lead stated this in her testimony. She stated it once. She did not state it again. She did not need to. Sandra Pruitt moved to Callaway County in 2021. She works days now. She has said in the years since that she does not watch the news the way she used to, that she notices things she wishes she could stop noticing, that she checks parking lots when she walks to her car at night, and has done so every night since March 2018, and does not expect that to change. She has never received a formal communication from the Delworth County Sheriff's Office. No acknowledgement, no apology, no statement that her information was accurate and that its dismissal had consequences. Roberta Merritt received a victim's impact statement form. She submitted it. It is part of the official record. Sandra Pruitt submitted 2 call logs. They are also part of the official record. The official record is not the same as acknowledgement. This distinction appears to matter to no one in any position to change it. Sandra Pruitt gave one statement to the press after the conviction. She gave it to a local paper in Callaway County, not to a television crew, not to a podcast, not to anyone from the Delworth Sheriff's Office. She said, "I told them what I saw. I told them twice. I don't know what else I was supposed to do." The Delworth County Sheriff's Office has not issued a public statement regarding the handling of the Merritt tip calls. Both logs remain classified in the official case record as unverified. Unverified. The word still sits there in the system. Sandra Pruitt's 7 minutes and 40 seconds of precise, accurate, time-specific information about a room number, a truck, a dent, a man watching a window in a dark parking lot. Still classified as unverified, in a case that was closed with a conviction built on exactly what she described. She told them what she saw. Twice. If you stayed until the end, everything in the script is drawn from court records, FOIA release case communications, published investigative journalism, and cold case review findings. All of it available in the public record for anyone who wants to look. What moment in this story stayed with you? Leave it in the comments. I read everyone. And if you think institutions should be held to the same standard of accountability they apply to everyone else, you know where the subscribe button is.